New York Yankees, Philanderers and Adulterers. Back in the 1990s, certainly not every Yankee player had sexual encounters with the underage schoolgirls who worked part-time at the stadium during the summer, or cheated on their wives with mistresses. But the players who were loose and promiscuous more than made up for the ones who weren't. William Nathaniel Nat Buck Showalter III had been a player, coach, and manager for the Yankees farm teams before being brought to Yankee Stadium as a coach, then manager. Former Clubhouse employee Paul Priori says, Showalter didn't seem to get much respect from players because he was arrogant. He also thought having a mistress was a perk of the manager's job. Paul and employee Robert were enlisted by Showalter several times to help juggle his affair. Since the mistress didn't live in New York, Paul and Robert were ordered to take a taxi to the airport, where Paul would meet Angela Showalter and her kids and take them in a taxi to a hotel, and Robert would meet the mistress and would take her in another taxi to a hotel near the other one. Easy for Buck to be with the wife and kids, then the mistress, the same night. Paul and Robert would take taxis back to the stadium and catch up on work duties. Paul says, You'd think that Showalter would be grateful to Robert and me for helping him. Instead, the jerk treated us like shit around the clubhouse, which pissed off both of us. I didn't want to be part of his deceptions. I was forced to go along with him. He told Robert and me very clearly that it was part of our job to do these favors for him. I came really close to telling his wife what was going on, but for some reason I didn't, just a gut feeling I had. I figured he'd get careless one day, and she'd find out by catching him in the act. When the Yankees went on road trips, sometimes the mistress would meet up with Showalter. But if she didn't, and his wife and kids had stayed home, Paul would see Buck pick up a groupie in the hotel bar. Maybe he didn't want to be alone, says Paul. Mariano Rivera was another adulterer, and had Paul make his mistress dates for him. Paul says, Rivera would walk over to me and say, Come with me. We'd go into the storage room where I'd pick up the phone, say my name, and ask for an outside line, and he'd dial the number, then I'd ask for a girl's name, and when she came to the phone, I would hand it to him. And he'd make his date. That happened a few times a week. And when the team was going on the road and Rivera knew his wife wasn't going, he'd have me call his out-of-town bimbos and get them lined up. Rivera was probably the biggest hypocrite in the clubhouse, professing to be religious and taking part in daily Bible readings with some other players, all the time screwing a lot of women behind his wife's back. Other players noticed Paul making calls for Rivera's mistresses, and guys like Doc Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, and Luis Soho began doing it too, asking Paul to help them make calls. Paul says, Every player acted paranoid the whole time I was on the phone for them. It was almost comical. Some wanted me to do all the talking, for example, telling the girls where they should meet after the game. Sometimes players would leave tickets under an alias so the girls could get into the stadium. Then after the game, when reporters were finished with interviews, players, maybe several at a time, would meet the girls in the fitness room or batting cage room and have quickies with them. Rivera, Strawberry, and Gooden had their girls come in like that at least a few times a week. Paul adds, I had mixed feelings about participating in their deceptions. I guess I was the only person they trusted to do it. Probably had something to do with me refusing to forge players' autographs. And I was discreet. I also knew what they were doing was wrong, cheating on their wives. But I was told to never say no to a player's request, so it was tough for me to rationalize. Some players would strut their stuff around the stadium, showing off their uniforms for adoring females, from concession workers to the groupies who hung out at the gates, and most of it seemed innocent. But others pushed the limit with sexual activity with underage girls. Gerald Williams got caught having sex with a schoolgirl in a storage room by a security guard on his rounds. Paul says, I overheard Williams brag to a teammate that he had a couple of illegitimate kids knocking around that he refused to acknowledge as his, and ended up paying hush money to prevent the media from finding out. Williams competed with bad boy Luis Polonia to see who could score with the most girls. Polonia liked groupies, and their age didn't seem to matter. Once when the team was on the road, Polonia was charged with having sex with an underage girl. He claimed she told him she was older. He'd pleaded no contest. It was reported that George Steinbrenner had testified in court, asking the judge to show leniency, calling Polonia a little kid who really doesn't know his way around. It isn't like he grabbed a girl, put her in the car, took her to the hotel, and did something with her. So the old man didn't think there was much wrong with underage sex as long as the girl hadn't been abducted. When the fearless leader sets the standard, what can go wrong? The assistant district attorney had disagreed, stating that Luis Polonia is an adult and he did not act responsibly. He acted criminally. Polonia was convicted and sentenced to 60 days in jail. Brian Cashman, current general manager of Major League Baseball's fastest fading in popularity franchise, New York Yankees. Cashman destroyed his 16-year marriage with at least 2 mistresses, Kim Brennan and Louise Neathway, a.k.a. Meanwell, that the media has reported on. He'd had it made with a wonderful wife and 2 adorable children. But he had to piss it all away. Now he's wallowing in the gutter where he belongs. There's no cure for stupidity. Everything here is absolutely true and can be proven. It's excerpted from Abused by the New York Yankees by Paul Priori and Gary Tushek.